Hi. So here we are, class 3 for our transmedia semester, business class on transmedia marketing. Really good times. I find this stuff so interesting. I know some of you do too. So let's get to it. Okay, so here you can see that we have done class 1, which was the intro. Class 2, we started with marketing planning part 1, and today, class 3 is marketing planning part 2. Due for today would be our case study on Mad Men, branding the American dream. So we're not going to talk about that. We won't talk about that until we actually finish class 4, which is at this point scheduled for right after this class. Okay. Our goals for class 3, we'll be talking about the importance of audience, and then we'll also talk about goals and objectives for your marketing plan. So here we're going to talk about, basically why audience rules nowadays, how we went from this top-down structure from the studio system from Hollywood in the 1950s to the way media is made and formed and progresses, and the way that it interacts with audiences on an emotional level. And then we're going to talk about identifying and targeting your specific audiences, and then how to engage and reward your audiences. Rotten Tomatoes, Yelp, personal YouTube channels, with their own digital distribution platforms and social media voices, audiences are powerful not only as producers, distributors, and marketers of their own content, but also as critics, funders, and ambassadors of your content. Smash hits are determined in almost every realm today by audiences and word of mouth. Audiences' trust in major institutions has plummeted in the past few decades, especially among younger audiences. But their trust in, for example, their friends or their neighbors' opinions has soared. So word of mouth marketing underpins today's marketing and outreach. So a lot of places, you know, before you before you buy something or before you commit to spending money on something, often you will look at the reviews that a product or an event or whatever has gotten. So Yelp is one of these ways, Rotten Tomatoes, YouTube. What we do nowadays is we look for these reviews to inform us on whether or not we want to buy the product. So maybe the ad campaign might look really good, but you see that the user reviews are really low, you'll probably not buy that product. And so this is one of the ways that audiences influence one another on what to purchase. Some people contend that audiences have become too fragmented and personalized to categorize. Audiences don't fit neatly into demographic boxes like age, gender, and race the way they did in the advertising industry's heyday after World War II. Humans seek connections and find affinity groups through their psychographic traits like pastimes, beliefs, and predilections. There's an author named Seth Godin. He wrote a book called Tribes, and he posits that the internet has ended mass marketing and revived audiences' tribal behavior and their groupings. So what you want to do is you want to feel these tribal stirrings and market with them, not to them. Right after World War II, the easiest way to reach audiences was through TV. You had wrapped audiences, quote unquote, after dinner, sitting down as a family. And marketing back in those days and advertising, the target audience could be basically 85% of the US, for example, and it could be reached through ABC, CBS, or NBC. And so there was this idea of like this typical American audience, which didn't account for tribes and affiliations and interests and things like that. Nowadays, where we have multiple viewing platforms, we have binging with Netflix and things like that. We can watch what we want based on these psychographic traits. So young people and old people can still share the same interest, say, in horror films, and they can be marketed towards now. Kind of cool. So, what we want to do is we want to describe and differentiate, and then we want to use these categorizing dyads. So, as I mentioned before, old school marketing thought the primary audience was the quote, the general American public. The top-down strategy that we've talked about already assumed that there was this sort of average single audience persona. In modern marketing, content and audiences are striated. They're layered into many specific segments and niches. The idea is now to react well to those, and engage with them so fully that they become your project ambassadors. And by them becoming your project ambassadors, they then reach a wider audience. So in order to do this, you have to know them as well as you would know, for example, your family and friends. So the first step in identifying and knowing and then reaching your audiences is describing and differentiating them. And these categorizing dyads that place a finer point on your target audiences. So you have two there. You have influencer audiences. These are often gatekeepers within key industries defined by platform, genre, or subject. And that could be anyone like a celebrity, maybe press, policymakers. It could be government entities, NGOs, and educators, for example. And then the other one is public audiences, and these are your, final end users who can be categorized in various ways. You could have millennials or mystery lovers, for example. And then within this, you have two more points, which would be mass audiences. Mass audiences are encompassed in, for example, television as a mass marketing vehicle. So advertisers in the 60s had the money to buy national TV spots and could easily reach most of the country. Mass audience in TV could be something like the Super Bowl or the show The Big Bang Theory, for example. But because of online convergence, audiences are more and more niche. And niche shows could be shows like, for example, Breaking Bad or Amish Mafia. Okay, so we want to talk about then demographics and psychographics. So demographics means age, gender, ethnicity, geography, education, and income. Psychographics, that would include things like your audience's interest or interests, their ideology, and predispositions. So preschoolers and grandparents, for example, they can have similar niche interests like scouting or baking, Things like that, where it doesn't matter what the age, gender, ethnicity, geography, education, or income is, it's a shared psychographic interest or ideology. And then you have a few different kinds of demographic categories. And there are quite a few demographic categories that can have a profound effect, basically, on modern life and modern advertising. For example, age, ethnicity, and gender. But today I'm just going to talk about age. So there are two subfields. There's generational and life stage marketing. So it's interesting because, and also I just want to say that I'm generalizing. Um, so the first one, generational, has to do with the generation that you're targeting. So baby boomers have, for example, desktop computers, landlines, and maybe they watch traditional television. Generally speaking, they like lighthearted and clever humor, and they respond to likable characters. Millennials are more likely to consume media wirelessly across platforms simultaneously on laptops or tablets, smartphones, and game consoles. They can handle multi-sensory communications, and they prefer high stimulation and rich media, satirical humor, and respond to aspirational characters like celebrities. Now, I'm not a baby boomer, and I'm also not a millennial. I'm Gen X. But as I was reading this description, I had to laugh because I was sitting on the sofa and I had my laptop and I was creating my PowerPoint while I was watching the news, while I had my phone and I was like messaging and I had a remote. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely like in between baby boomers and millennials because I wasn't working with a game console. But anyway, I was just like, for a minute there, I was like, oh, okay, that's describing me. The second one is life stage marketing, and it recognizes people's interests and needs and how they change in different stages of life. So 20 somethings care about, for example, maybe they care about their credit rating when they're going to buy their first car. But middle-aged people, are dealing with, for example, aging parents, and they become more aware of health and caregiving issues. So, different techniques work for different life stages, different marketing techniques. Nostalgia marketing is effective when audiences approach middle age. So it's interesting to think about this in terms of our semester project, your semester project. Um, just the fact that it takes place in the 90s. You could use nostalgia marketing to target Gen Xers, Gen Yers. Is that a word? Um, in terms of nostalgia for the 90s. Um, you can categorize your audiences using more than one of these segmentation devices, but what you want to do is decide on your primary audiences. So, who is your main target? And then talk about also who your secondary audiences are. So, when we think of the film Napoleon Dynamite, for example, the primary audience was nerds. For Passion of the Christ, it was evangelicals. For My Big Fat Greek Wedding, it was targeted at Greek Americans and other similarly aligned ethnic groups. So you want to engage your audience in meaningful experiences. Audience engagement is a long-term strategy that creates loyalty and fans. Um, Engagement, the word engagement is a buzzword and is used to describe an audience member as a commodity. So, for example, a Facebook fan is said to be worth 174 US dollars. So that's taking a person and commodifying them. To engage your audiences, you have to reward them. This could be like, the old school purchase funnel that we looked at in the last class. But in modern times, the rewards can range from unlocking hard earned exclusive content to delivering a feeling of satisfaction for helping with a good cause. Audience devotion to games actually is unrivaled in any other entertainment realm. There's lots of rewards. So, your job as an engagement marketer is to quote unquote level up your audience's interest in and participation with your media project. You can start with a small ask, like joining a group, like your Facebook group, or following you on social media, and then bump up your asks and your rewards to engage audiences more deeply until you've got a bigger following. Over time, your super fans will become your best ambassadors. This was really interesting because, as you guys have heard Tlina talking about and Nicolina talking about the podcast that one time I was abducted by aliens. And I happened to be listening to them, the podcast talking about Scientology. And I was just like, oh my God, Scientology is like the best example of leveling up, right? It's like, give me all your money and then we'll promote you to the next Scientology level. Give us more money and you can go to the next level. Sign this billion-year Sea Org contract and you can level up some more. And so Scientology, is very much about leveling up. Works for them. Okay, hold on. I'm not telling you guys to, join a cult or anything, so please don't. Okay. So some general rules to engage audiences could be the following things. You could grant exclusive content so that super fans are part of an inner circle. That feels so good sometimes when you're part of this inner circle of knowledge, where you are granted, cutting edge information or technology before everybody else. You're a beta tester or something like that. Raise the stakes and rewards for engaging with your project in steps. Provide a forum for audience expression and co-creation. Co-creation is such a big one nowadays with audiences because they want to get involved and they want to write prequels and sidequels and character sketches, for example. Publicly recognize audience loyalty. This is a great one because some of you are actually learning now on your personal social media platforms that you have a lot of fans who are engaging with you, and sometimes it's really nice to acknowledge them like on your platform and say, hey, fanboy 263-191, just wanted to shout out to you and thanks for following me. So it's just these like personal touches basically, and acknowledging your audience. And also connect your project to a worthy cause. When you connect with an organization that, for example, rescues dogs, or sticks to sustainability issues and stuff like that, then other audiences, your audiences who find that to be a really important aspect of their life or a psychographic trait, you will really appeal to them in that way. Okay, so now we're going to talk about marketing goals and objectives. Goals we're going to talk about goals and their definitions and examples. Same thing with objectives. What is an objective and what are some examples? And then connecting goals to results. Goals are aspirational and purposeful. Your project must have measurable goals or objectives. So after you identify your audience, you should define and then refine what you want to achieve with those audiences. Your marketing plan basically charts this course. And the course is this journey, through your project's development all the way up to and following the launch of your project. So your goals and objectives are basically your signposts along the way. Goals are aspirational and purposeful, like I said. And so there's this infographic, this acronym called SMART. um, and that means that they are specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and then they're time-based. Goals can be long-term or short-term. A short-term goal might be to get your project's production greenlit from a studio. A long-term goal might be to earn $2 million in box office receipts, for example. Often, several objectives must be met in order to achieve a single goal. So let's look at this picture here. So the goal on the left side, purpose of overall project, outcomes, general and abstract, and long-term. So an example would be raise awareness of media project and associated themes among primary audiences. Objective, accomplishment via specific actions or tactics, outputs or actions, tangible and measurable, mid to short term. So example, generate 100 million culturally driven online and social media impressions on affinity group platforms before project launch. So, right, several objectives probably have to be met to reach this single goal. Let's say reach influencers at 15 high-profile industry events. So in order to reach influencers at 15 high-profile industry events, you have to actually go to 15 high-profile industry events. So that's actually, 15 actions or tactics. Well, I would say that's 15 actions. And then once you get to each one of the 15 events, you would employ tactics in order to reach the influencers at these events. Maybe you have the goal to generate 20 million media impressions. Well, in order to generate 20 million media impressions, media can include all of your social media platforms. It could include, television. It can include ads. It can include journalistic articles, for example. So all of those things are media. And then once you post press releases or something like that throughout these various media, then you might reach your 20 million impressions. And 20 million impressions, that means that 20 million individual users are exposed to your message. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have engaged with it. That would usually that's called a click-through, where they actually click on something and then read further about your message. Maybe your goal is to receive 2 top industry awards. Well, in order to receive 2 top industry awards, you will have to submit your project to a lot of, for example, film festivals or something like that. So all objectives targeted to influencer audiences that pay off on the above goal of, raise awareness of media project, then you have strategies that define the approaches or techniques that achieve the measurable objectives and goals. And then you have tactics or specific actions or activities that support the strategies. So we will talk later about actually measuring outcomes. But for now, let's look at just quantitative objectives and qualitative objectives. So here are some examples. Quantitative objectives, as you remember, are data-driven and math-bound, if you will. So box office sales, Nielsen ratings, game sales, event attendees, video downloads, page views, unique videos, click-throughs, likes, followers, and online coverage. You can quantify these things. You can count them. Qualitative objectives could be, for example, positive media reviews, press, bloggers, influencers' use of your project's key messages. It can be comments or quotes from press, influencers, or event attendees. It could be social media sentiment, proof of cultural currency. So maybe somebody does a parody or a meme, or popular culture allusions. Just fix that real quick. Audience perceptions in polls or focus groups would be another qualitative objective. If you set big, beaming goals that are supported by thoughtful, objective strategies and tactics, you just might exceed your goals. Everyone on your project team should know and embody your project's goals. So your project's purpose is also integral to its external brand salience. People buy into why you're doing something, not necessarily what you're doing. So, imagine the story for you guys, like the why behind your project. Oh, well, we had this semester on Transmedia, and we had to create this 3-episode TV show for our exam. That's the why behind it, And that story that you guys have shared for a semester exam, if this project were to be shown at like Cannes Film Festival or something, that would be your story. Well, this was an exam assignment and it just ended up exploding like Stranger Things. Who knew? I knew. Okay, anyway. But that's sort of the why behind it. But you can also have, more important things like, why is time a female character? Like you can have more information, deeper answers to the why behind a project. And that could be gender equality, representation. It could be about subverting tropes, for example. So the why behind what you're doing is often much more important to audiences than the what of what you're actually doing. So if your project's goals are about more than making money and have social or cultural value, then communicate those goals publicly. They also matter to your audiences. Okay, so that is it for class number 3, talking about your audiences and your goals and objectives to reaching your specific audiences and taking into consideration not just old school demographics, but also taking into consideration psychographic traits based on interests and hobbies, and this idea of like tribal affinity and affiliation. So that's it for class 3. Thanks for joining me, and I'll be back soon with class 4. Bye.